Welcome, everybody. Great that you could join today. I am Peter Adams, the moderator of today's session. As a quick introduction, I'm a Senior Director of Product Management here at Ivanti, covering the enterprise service management space. So that includes our product for IT service management, IT asset management, but also for the HR facilities, these non-IT shared service organizations. I've been working in the ITSM area for more than 20 years, had many discussions around self-service, how to organize that, how to draw people into a self-service interaction, what are other channels that customers want to use for interacting with the service desk. So happy to have you here today. And today we're joined here by two professionals in that space as well. He have a lot of experience around that topic too. Brian, Joshua, thanks for joining today. Maybe you can introduce yourself very quickly as well to the audience.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. So my name is Brian Hotzik. I'm the CTO of Network Consulting Services. We're an Ivanti partner, so we've been helping customers for about the past 20 years with a lot of their challenges. So appreciate you inviting us here today.
Awesome, and good morning, Peter and Brian and everyone on the call. My name is Joshua Tooley. I'm the Director of IT Support and Customer Experience at Texas Christian University. We've been Ivanti customers for quite some time. We're actually Sharewell users, so we've been an ITSM user of Sharewell for about 10 years. I've been in the industry for over 20 and definitely all in higher education, kind of learning that experience of different audiences that we have, from faculty and staff down to students. It's really been a fun experience and happy to share all of the knowledge that we've learned on that journey.
Thank you. First of all, appreciate that you take the time to join today. And again, looking forward to your perspectives, to your recommendations about that topic of employee support. So just to set the stage a little bit, again, Ivanti commissioned a survey last year of 7,800 office workers and IT staff members about the digital experience overall as employees. Now, one of the specific areas in that survey was about how they get help from IT, IT support interactions. And that's really what we wanted to focus on today. We wanted to review some of the findings that we've seen in that survey, and then again discuss some strategies you can use to improve the situation for any kind of organization. So let's get started. So the first results we wanted to look at is about the following questions. Which of these things have you done to get IT help or IT support in the last 6 months? That was the question. Again, the goal here was to understand what people are actually doing today to get IT help. And you can see the response here, getting help through the phone channel is still a very popular option here at 45%. Getting help through the self-service management solution, the service management solution through a self-service portal is another very popular one, but email, messaging, chat, walk-up support, those are other options. And you can see that, it was obviously possible to give multiple answers here for the employees, right? So it's interesting to see that, as of today, 2024, technically the survey was done last year, but fairly recently, that these more traditional support channels are still very important. And when I talk about traditional support channels, those are the ones that have been around a long time. Phone support, email support, even walk-up, although it did get I would say, a boost over the past few years again, is a very traditional way how to get help from IT support, right? So let me ask first here, Brian and Josh, does that reflect what you are seeing, at TCU or in general with the companies that you work with, Brian?
Yeah, I would say that that does line up with the organizations that I deal with. So I deal with a very wide mixture of organizations out there, and phone call is still number one. That really is a model that I think is going to be a tough one to shake. It really kind of just depends on your industry, and what your end customer is like. But I see the phone as still being something that our users are going to use. I want to kind of start to steer away from that, but there's other things coming into play here of what we've taught our users to do in the past. And we've always asked them, did you open a ticket? Well, maybe that's stuck in their brain. Oh, that means I have to pick up the phone and call, not necessarily, well, did I log it in a portal somewhere or do it something else. So I'm not surprised when I see these results. The second one on there about or the third one or fourth one where we're trying to help ourselves or things like that. I'm a little bit skeptical about some of those things, because this is you can select multiple options, and well, I would like to do this, but did we actually go through with that? That's kind of more of a bigger debate. Your organization would have to track those metrics to see if they really are actually reaching out via those other methods outside of phone. But that's kind of what I see with my customer base.
And I totally agree with you, Brian. That's what you see in a lot of organizations, that phone still tends to be the traditional number one method for individuals reaching out to the service desk. And in our environment, it's a little bit different. Actually, self-service is number one by quite a bit, much more on this chart, where it would be about 46, 47% of our incoming requests. And phones would be down into the 30s, where you would see the email and the self-service on this chart. And I think a lot of it's about where organizations drive the input or interactions with the service desk. I think part of it's about your level and ability to create a positive experience. That plays a big part in it, because if I have long hold times, I'm not going to pick up the phone and call. But if that's the only method in which I can get in touch with them, that's a method I'm going to have to use. So I think a lot of it depends on where your organization is pushing interactions with the service desk. How easy do you make it to reach out via self-service? We eliminated email well over a decade ago, almost 15 years ago. And so it helped to drive our self-service as a way to put in a request. And so that was an interaction or event that happened at the company level that helped to drive that change within that channel that we provided to our end users. They didn't have the option to message us anymore via email. And so I think a lot of this is very dependent on the company and the things that you're driving. If I'm going to your website and the first thing that pops up is put in a self-service ticket and your phone numbers in a little bitty tiny text at the bottom of your web page, yeah, you're going to see changes to how you drive that channel forward to your customers. And I think for the audience, as y'all are thinking about these particular pieces, what are you doing? What actions are you taking within your organization to really kind of help modify or change what channel you're wanting individuals to use? Because you can play a huge part in that particular piece in moving them that way. But then the other side of that is you've got to also create that positive experience that goes along with it, because you can push it as far as you possibly can, but people will only use it for as positive as that experience is overall. So the one thing that I was curious about on this one was just the amount of individuals that just said none of the above. And I'm always curious how they're reaching out to us. It goes to show that there is a tremendous number of individuals that still don't even want to use the channels that we're providing and are lost in that mix and how they're trying to get support from our service desk.
Yeah, we'll get a little bit of that in the next question as well. But thanks. I mean, you're right. There's a tremendous influence you can have in steering the employee base, so to speak, towards specific options here, right? Now, in my view, phone support, even though it's been around and it's a costly approach that doesn't scale very well, it still has a place, specifically if there are, big outages or emergencies. Those, in my view, are really hard to handle through other channels. In that case, you should actually call somebody right up so that you have an immediate response. So the one that I find most flawed, and I think you referred to it a little bit as well, is the email one. Because again, while I understand it's super tempting to send out a one-liner by email, it's something that you anyway use as a medium, so to speak, every day, or many people use it at least. It's such a flawed interaction, right? It's, don't get a time to respond. Often it takes longer because, somebody has to call back or reach out and understand what the issue is, because there's usually not enough context. So again, it's in my view, the most challenging portion here of that channel mix. I'm interested, you said you had switched this off quite a while ago, a couple of years ago. Any specific recommendations you can give about how you went about it, right? To basically say, I don't want to offer this as channel anymore because it's so problematic.
Oh man, I can honestly tell you it was not easy to make that happen. And it's still not easy. I still have people that are always searching for ways to reach out to the service desk. And I will honestly tell you the reason that we turned off email long ago was really kind of for two reasons. One, because we would get emails from individuals saying, my toilet's broken, because we were the help desk. So we were the only location that anyone was providing support from. So one, there was no context for why you reach out to us and what you need to provide in terms of data. And two, the level of expectation from users is different. I think that most users who send an email are very disengaged. It's like, hey, here you go, I got a problem, please fix it. And there's not much engagement from, I need to be part of solving that problem. I need to be part of helping you. I need to be responsive. But some also don't use don't really kind of take the context of email as well and start treating it like a chat. Well, I sent an email 2 minutes ago. Why haven't you responded to me yet? They want an active engagement. So it's expectations from the users that made that really, really challenging. And so we decided moving away from that median was the most important piece. The one thing that was a big challenge for us was eliminating the mailbox that had already been in use. And so we still even monitor that mailbox to this day, even though there's automated responses that go back and things like that tell individuals not to utilize it, and they have other methods to go in. But we even take the opportunity to review what's done and see if they follow through with those. And even after 15 years, we've never fully eliminated it, but it's not used. Maybe one a month that people will still utilize an old solution that we provided many, many years ago.
Yeah. I mean, overall, I have to say, again, first of all, it's good that we see multiple channels, right? I mean, that shows IT organizations care about the overall employee experience, providing different options. I mean, I agree with you on the email as one of the channels, maybe that shouldn't be part of the mix, but I think overall having a mix of channels is an important aspect. And again, that reflects that IT thinks about what the preferences are of the employees, what's the overall experience. So I think that's overall a good thing, but as you stated, you have influence over it, in which directions you want to steer people. I think it's important to design the self-service interactions in a way that is meaningful to employees. So you need to use their terminology, you need to monitor what they search for so that you use the right terms, etc., as you design a self-service portal. So those are important aspects, right? So let's move on to the next question here. The question here was considering all the ways you get help with tech, what do you typically turn to first? So this actually goes back to your point, what are people doing elsewhere? Are they really going through the service desk, or are there even other sources of help, so to speak? And it's interesting to see here the fairly large amount of employees who turn to coworkers to get help. Now, if you add up all the responses that look to workplace support, whether it's calling the workplace support or chatting with them or going through a self-service portal, in total it adds up to 50%. So that's a good thing, but it should be higher. It's amazing that 27% still try to get help from a coworker, in my perspective. So what do you think drives that? Is that surprising to you, that number? What do you think drives that fairly high rate still that turn to coworkers, or potentially even other sources for help, right?
Yeah, I thought that was a very interesting stat. And I mean, it makes sense, right? We ask our coworkers for help on lots of other things. Why wouldn't we ask them help around technology? But that really poses an interesting question. What is the response going to be from that coworker? Is it going to be the correct answer, right? Is it going to be something that is, really just more of a perception problem? Oh, the IT department, they do nothing for us. They're not going to help you. We've got attitude problems when it comes to something like that. You got to remember, a lot of our end users think that we're the department of no. They don't understand regulations. They don't understand compliance reasons. They don't understand security. All they know is, well, they tell us no, or I can't do this, or it's always going down, right? So there's that weird problem that coworker, maybe even right at the start, is going to impact their experience with us by, taking our brand of what we're doing and, maybe tarnishing it a little bit even before that experience has started. So that's one thing I always encourage customers to really think about is that the feelings and what we're advertising out to our end users. I like some trends where we do things like we brand our self-service with a silly name. Oh, it's my support something, tied to your organization name. Maybe you got a silly mascot associated with it, and you're really kind of trying to push that brand of how to get support, because as this shows, we are going to have a huge piece of how our users are going to get support from their neighbor. Well, let's make sure that experience feels right, and we want that coworker to give the right answer. Hey, did you go to the self-support portal and try and get your own answers? Well, think about how you're going to make that interaction happen.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, Josh, does your organization use that kind of branding for the service desk to kind of draw people in, give it more of an identity?
We do for different things, like some chatbots, like our walk-up desk is actually called the Frog Pad. So it's like an Apple Genius bar, but it has a name to it. Those things do really have a big impact on customers and helping them remember that overall experience. And the one thing I'll kind of point out about asking a coworker, it doesn't surprise me, but it is not a stat I want to see, because it's an indicator, as Brian was talking about a lack of trust with IT or a lack of ability to make it easy for the customer. If 30% of the time it's easier for me to turn to my coworker than it is to turn to IT, who are the experts in the field, that says something about my organization and what I'm doing to brand that back out to them and provide them service that they're looking for. Now, there are a lot of factors that come into asking a coworker for help. They understand my work better. They might have gone through this in the past and already have the direct, exact answers. They may be more experienced in those particular areas. And again, a lot of those factors really play into why that's so high. I think a lot of it's really related to ease of use. It is so much easier for me to turn to the person next door to me and say, hey, how do I get this solved? Is there something I need to do here? Do I put in a ticket with the help desk? Oh, yeah. You put in a ticket with the help desk and they go take care of it. So they're still going through that process, but it's not necessarily the first place that they start. And I think that's a unique stat, and definitely something that all organizations really have to think about is how do you ensure, as Brian pointed out earlier, are the coworkers providing the accurate information you need, or are they trying to work around the system that's there? And so you've got to find ways in your organization about trying to ensure that accuracy is coming from the coworkers that are sharing that information.
Yeah, I love that. I love that term frog pad, Josh. Super easy. So, because now think about what that coworker is going to say. They don't have to remember the intricacies of how to open a self-service ticket and all the. Well, did you go to the frog pad? It's a simple response that we can give, and you're much more confident that coworker is going to be giving the accurate response.
Yeah. I mean, especially in these times when there's a lot of security attacks, challenges, etc. I think it's important to take those aspects in a response into account, right? As you stated, that's sometimes may not happen when you turn to coworker. But in my view, the other aspect that's often forgotten is a productivity aspect, right? So in the end, there's a dedicated team who's there, designed to help, who's professionals about it. And they're chartered to do that, right? If you use the time of a coworker, it's a productivity loss as well. And so from that perspective, I think that's something to think about it as well, right? But of course, it's a little bit in the nature of things. But Josh, let me ask one thing. When we discussed this topic previously, you had shared an interesting concept that I hadn't heard very often. And again, I've been working in that area for more than 20 years, right? So, you basically have established a concept where you actually intentionally involve coworkers in the overall support experience. So can you share a little bit about that? I think that's an interesting concept.
Sure. I'll kind of give you an idea of our environment. We have over 80 buildings on campus and over 600 acres of space. So people are all over the place, and trying to share information is always a challenge. And when we found ourselves locked in sometimes to sending massive communications about outages, and it took longer to put the communication together than it did to actually solve the problem in some cases. And so we developed kind of a grassroots coworker type knowledge situation where we have a group of individuals called IT liaisons. And their goal is to be individuals that are technical contacts in each of the different areas across campus and individuals that just decide that they want to join, where we share constant communication with them that we don't necessarily share to the rest of campus. And the part of that is that those individuals have agreed to then send communication and messaging out to their respective peers that they work with in order to at least bring more attention to a particular issue. Hey, a printer server is going to be down for the next 15 minutes because we're having to reboot a system. I'm not going to send a campus-wide email about that because by the time I send the message out and get it approved, the issue's already been solved. But I can send a quick email to the liaison team and they share with their team members. And a lot of it is, I think, about that connection as a coworker. I'm much more likely to read an email from one of my peers than I am an email that's being sent out to the entire campus from IT. And so we've really kind of taken on to this model of utilizing the coworkers to help share that information with their teammates. It's really been very successful, and it often allows us to reroute issues that might have come to the service desk because these are the primary people that would always be reaching out when we're having issues. And we share tremendous amounts of information with them, and they can all choose to be part of it. They don't have to be. There's no pressure on them in that case, but many of them really take it to the next level of communication to their teammates.
Yeah, I love it. It's a very interesting concept. And, I think it's clear that you designed the experience, so to speak, how to involve them. It's not an ad hoc approach, so to speak, but it's more a kind of a designed portion of the overall experience, right? Love it. So let's get moving to the next slide here. The question here was, when you have a tech problem at work, do you prefer that somebody fixes it for you, or do you give information or to get information to fix it yourself? So this again was about more the attitude of people. Are they trying to generally solve issues themselves, or are they just trying to get somebody to do it? Now, I think the large number here of responses around getting the information to fix it myself with 48%, in my view, reflects that especially office workers, IT staff, the target audience for that survey, a lot of people are quite used to technology these days. They use it and embrace it in their daily life. They do it at work, it's often part of the work here, and they embrace it and trying to understand it and fix it and use it themselves. So to some degree, I think it reflects a shift in general attitudes toward technology, and that it's much more part of our daily life here, right? So one thing, in your opinion, do you think, when they try to fix it themselves, are they doing this for all the problems, or do you think it's more nuanced, right? That some employees are trying to do the easy stuff themselves, but then reach out. What's your take on it?
So I kind of try and look at my own personal experiences to try and reflect on it a little bit, because I do the exact same thing. There's plenty of times when, it doesn't matter, I need to call my bank, or, something to do with insurance, or, anything I'm doing with my normal interactions with support. There's plenty of times I pick up the phone. I do the exact same thing. I do what we're trying to not get our users to do. So I try and take a step back and say, well, what made me pick up that phone call? And there's usually not like one giant obvious thing sitting in front of me. It's small, subtle things. When I go to their website and they don't have a knowledge base, they have a frequently asked questions and there's only 2 questions on there, right? Or I go through that experience and it doesn't feel like there's a place I can submit a ticket, or it just is for general inquiries and so forth. So try and pay attention in your own personal life when you suddenly pick up the phone and say, well, if they would have had a form here that designates this particular process, blah, 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 then I would not have picked up the phone call. Just do that exact same thing with your users, and maybe even go as far as to ask them in an incredibly polite way, hey, how could I have fixed this automatically for you? What did you try ahead of time? We can have our technicians even gather some of that data from our users in a very polite way, hopefully. What could you have done to solve this? Did you try any methods before you picked up the phone? That may also give a little bit of almost survey results for your own organization.
Totally agree, Brian. Sometimes it's really about thinking about what you would do. But I do think that in some cases, you have to take this particular information with a grain of salt, because I think it deals very much with urgency and complexity. if I have an urgent issue that I need to solve now and support is not available for a period of time, yeah, I'm going to dig in myself to solve that issue. But I think at the same time, there's a level of complexity that would easily rotate this survey scores if we identified, hey, if you could reset your password on your own, are you going to do that or are you going to have someone do it? Oh, man, you probably have 90% say, I'm going to fix this one myself. But if I turned around and said, you need to reimage your computer and walk through a 2-hour process of pulling data down and backing systems up and running updates and applying this, you're going to see that easily flip to 90% want someone else to do it. And so I think as we in IT start to roll out implementations and services across the board, every service we look at, we have to think about where is this chart going to be rated for the level of complexity for that particular issue. I think it helps us to determine how much self-service do we put out there, how much automation do we provide for them to do it, and then how much do we always have in place for them to put in the request to have us walk through that process. And I think you have to evaluate that every time you launch a service. And the goal should always be trying to take the pressure off the service desk. But there are some things that you can't always remove, at least based on the environment or the configurations that you have in place. And so you've got to adjust your service models and your way to input those requests to adapt to that particular model.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's important, again, as IT service desk organization design experience, is to have that nuanced view. Yes, we should embrace that people want to understand and do certain things themselves and provide the right information through knowledge, through automation, etc. Right? But then they should not be afraid, so to speak, to contact the service desk. And I think there should be a clear communication. Hey, let us take care of these more complex issues, right? Themselves, right, or ourselves, right, as a service desk organization. So I think it's again that nuanced view, and encouraging people to reach out for these more complex issues, right? Rather than try to see it's either one or the other, right, so to speak. I think that's right. I mean, we talked already a little bit about some of the strategies. Knowledge, of course, is a big topic. Automation to some degree as well. Knowledge management is notoriously challenging for many organizations, right? How to keep an up-to-date, relevant knowledge base, etc. Any recommendations you have for the audience around that topic, right? How to, again, provide that information to the audience to be able to help themselves?
I think it's really just investing the time. We're just far too reactionary in IT. You always hear these statements, oh, we're running around with our hair on fire, or just putting out fires, things like that. Knowledge is unfortunately something that just is hard. There is no easy fix for it. You simply got to invest the time in it. So I promise you it will pay off in spades in the long run, but you've got to get the organization to sit down and dedicate the time to it, and curate that knowledge and make sure it is created. So there is no easy fix there, but it will pay off if you invest the time in it.
Agreed. And sometimes it might not always be knowledge based. I mean, I think that there is a tremendous push for that, over the past decade to provide that knowledge. But I think the things that really give value to users now are automation. They're seeing IT work through automatic tools where I can install software, where I can put in requests that make things happen on my machine without human interaction. And so I think that's that next step. We're kind of at a teetering hard point of where knowledge and where automation really kind of combine together and provide value to our customers. But I think that's the piece that people are looking for. I think they expect everything in IT to just be automatically done, that we can press a magic button and it solves all of our problems. And it's simply not that way in most environments, and something that we have to assess as we're trying to create and design experiences.
Absolutely. The topic of automation is so important, right? On the Ivanti side, we obviously do quite a bit here in terms of installing software on client devices, etc. So I agree that's an extremely important part, and you could easily fill an entire another webinar around how to organize such an automation initiative, right? How do you invest in it? How do you justify the investment? How do you shift resources from reactive to proactive? That's a whole discussion topic on its own, right? But let's move on. This is the last slide we wanted to look at for today. Again, there's actually two questions here. So the first one was about Sometimes employees can solve the IT problem using a chatbot or digital automation. Is this something you would choose if it was available? And you can see here from the responses, half of the respondents said, I would rather choose a human to solve my IT problem. Okay, 26% said, yeah, I would work with such an automated option, a chatbot, a virtual assistant. 17% had no difference. And then there was a follow-up question about, okay, if the chatbot or the automation was as helpful as using a human, would that change your mind? And you can see from the responses here, still a large portion, 58% would say, no, it wouldn't change my mind. I would still want to get the help from a human versus from, again, that chatbot or virtual assistant automation technology here. So, Brian, Josh, what do you think drives the preference for this kind of human support interaction? Any thought on that?
Yeah, so my take on this is we've got a real problem where the industry that's kind of right next to us is going to be driving a lot of this. And, more think what, ChatGPT is doing and, more on the customer service side. The problem is those things are getting much, much better. It's jumped leaps and bounds here in the past even, 18 months. But what the problem we need to really educate, not just the people in IT, but we also need to educate management because they're not going to understand this, is the fact that anytime you use anything that's, the large language models or the generative AI, things like that, it is only as good as the training data. Meaning if we're just indexing, the internet, that's what, ChatGPT and so forth are doing. That's not good enough for corporate support, right? It doesn't understand how I submit a PTO request, for example. The first hit on Google is irrelevant to my organization's needs around that. So the experience that people are going to have here when they're talking to these chatbots, if there is not great data on the back end to train them against, they are going to have a bad experience. It's just not going to understand them. So my biggest caution here is to our customers, don't try and skip the steps of, well, what is the data we're going to have it train against? Do I have solid request offerings that I want to offer up as part of that? Do I have a great knowledge base that I can offer things up and have it go and index? If I don't have that maturity level yet, adding a chatbot is only going to make it worse. The users are going to have a worse experience. They're going to think, oh, this is great, I can just chat. And then we'll just end up escalating always up to a human. So definitely something we got to pay extra attention to.
And Brian, you are making the reason and the huge point why on that second slide, it's talking more about people preferring human interactions. The maturity of our chatbot implementations, the maturity of the digital automation that's there is just not been a great experience for individuals as companies have tried to jump on board and start this. They want it to take away the need for a call center environment, but I will honestly tell you, nothing will ever replace the human experience of a positive conversation, a laugh on the phone, and other things. So you have to really consider that as you're implementing these in your organization and that journey that's there. I never want to implement a tool like this and say, oh, well, we're going to reduce call volume by 50% in order to do this. I don't want that to occur. I want that to occur over time as we've matured the model and learned from it. I want people to get in for a small period of time and give me that feedback and let me make the tool better. But I think a lot of organizations have implemented chatbots and some of these solutions, and it's trash in and trash out. If I didn't really provide the great information in the beginning, I'm not going to be able to have that positive experience at the end. And myself personally, I absolutely never use a chatbot because I never have positive experiences because I tend to be a person who's already researched the issue myself, and I'm asking for a very minute, specific exception to a situation, and I constantly get pegged back with, well, here are the top searches on that. I see chatbots as a Google search. I do a Google search, and I get the top 10 most used articles, and then I get 5 pages of other articles I can use that might relate to that particular issue. The chatbot spits out the top 10, and that's the only solution it gives you. Whereas with Google, I'm digging down further, I'm looking further. So it depends on the personality of the person who's there and what they're looking for, especially when they're looking for exception-based pieces. And the chatbots have not really moved us in that direction yet. I know that people are trying to do it to offload the pressures on their service desk and others. And I think there's some great ways to do it, but you've got to be very, very careful about that journey, because all you may do is turn negativity towards IT or towards the experience of having to put a request into the service desk.
Yeah. I mean, you made a perfect point. I think we've all used chatbot interactions. We're frustrated by, having to rephrase the issue multiple times and it would still not understand. Now, I do believe the technology will get better. And so, again, I certainly see it as part of a healthy channel mix, so to speak. But you're right, a direct human interaction often has nuances that are often not reflected by the chatbot, even including making more proactive suggestions and recommendations to somebody who's looking help for a specific problem, right? You often can look a little bit ahead and make more proactive suggestions. Absolutely, right? So again, for me, it's part of a healthy channel mix, but certainly not something that should be exclusively be relied on, right? Okay, so I think we've went through some of the highlights, again, specific around IT support that were part of this survey. And we already talked about a couple of recommendation strategies as part of the discussion here. Maybe as a final question to you both, what would you recommend? Where should audience start? Where should IT organizations start? So again, we talked about multiple recommendations, et cetera, but where should they start?
Yeah, my recommendation is get to know your audience a little bit better. Everyone's a little bit different. We've got generational problems. Maybe you have a lot older generation of your end users, and that might shift to, having to have phone a lot more still be part of the equation. Maybe you got a lot younger generation. So, sit down and ask your users. They will give us a good feedback. So, interact with them and ask them what they would like. And then, that knowledge management, I've already hit it a couple of times. It is incredibly important. If we want to have a good longer term experience, if we want to start getting into these, these better chatbots and so forth, without having that data on the back end of knowledge, it's, you're really going to struggle with that. So I would definitely try and focus on those things.
And I can't reinforce what Brian said anymore, is that understanding your audience is key. I mean, that's kind of where our liaisons component came in not long ago, understanding more about that interaction between coworkers and who they go ask for. But I think the other part of this too is really crafting and designing the experience that you want. You may just be delving into using self-service. You may just be delving into using chat. And you have to pull in customer interactions to get their feedback about what you're trying to do, because we in IT are also often trying to solve problems that we have internally in terms of how we process and deal with requests that aren't necessarily problems for our customers. And the harder we make issues on them, the less likely they are to utilize the services that we're providing. And so I think I saw a question in Q&A kind of talking about how do you devise your resources and separate things out by input channels and others. And it takes a tremendous amount of planning and thoughtfulness, but a lot of it is also about thinking where your organization wants to push people. Maybe it is getting rid of email. Maybe it is moving everyone to self-service and driving them to those those pieces. But you've got to talk to your customers to get their input on how they can utilize that particular experience more and understand how often they're going to use certain things. And I will also tell you too, as you look at each of these different channels and you think about the interaction, the time you take from a service desk perspective, when I look at the stats in our call center environment, I absolutely hate chat over phone calls, because our chats take twice as long, sometimes 3 times as long on average to deal with. But the flex about that from a perspective of kind of an omni-channel call center environment, I can allow individuals to handle more than one chat at a time, whereas on a phone call, I can only take one call at a particular time. And so there's some thoughts to think about in each of these channels about really balancing the pressure that you put on your service desk and the individuals that are there to help them think through what is that how can I make sure that that incoming channel is fair and balanced across all the different inputs that we have that are coming in. And it's a big challenge that we very much still struggle with today ourselves.
Well, thank you for your insights here. It was really helpful to get your perspective on it. I think we're now at a point where we can take a few questions here. We have a few minutes left. So any questions? I'm also looking at what came in through the Q&A.
Yeah, so there's a Q&A question here around, is there a ChatGPT equivalent for Ivanti? And where's Ivanti going with that? I think there's some really great components as part of that. Even some little stepping stones of, like automatically setting the service and category. That's not as super fancy as, a chatbot and so forth, but you've been actually training and creating training data, and maybe you didn't even know it. An email comes in, and it creates an incident, right? And then a human goes and looks at that incident, and they say, oh, they asked for this particular problem. The service is this, and the category is that. That means it's going to go land on a certain team. Well, we can actually take that data and run it through a machine learning algorithm and actually have it go and automatically set that service and category. So for the unfortunate channel, when we are using email, we can at least have it try and land in a better spot to begin with. So there are some baby steps that you can take there, as well as the more fancy versions of that, like with our digital assistant. But I want to make sure everyone's aware that you can take baby steps into just that machine learning of automatically setting service and category.
Yeah, and just to answer the specific question about the chatbot, yes, Ivanti has actually two offerings. One is a full-fledged AI-driven chatbot or virtual assistant with our Ivanti digital assistant capability. And then we do have a more lightweight MS Teams bot that can also drive support interactions. Now, that's not as powerful, but on the other hand, again, that's much easier often to roll out in some cases. And so we do have that, kind of two levels of establishing a bot type interaction, right? I also see the question here about context, and that's a good one here. So again, as support tickets come in, often the context is missing, specifically when it's email, but even in some other area. So that actually brings me to a good point that that's the area where the Ivanti portfolio really shines, in that we have, again, those endpoint management solutions that can collect information about what's happening on the device. In many cases, it can be solved directly. This is what we call self-healing, right? But then even if a ticket then is submitted automatically or after confirmation from the user, it has all this contextual information, because again, it does come from a point where you have the insights about, what's the exact device name, what happened, what is contextual information about the situation. So you have much richer, much more meaningful tickets, when you go through that type of interaction.
Well, I think in the answer to that question too, you have to think a lot about, why does your organization always need to know that? If your organization requires you to know the name of the workstation that they're using, I already know from our asset system exactly what 3 devices someone has assigned, so I can make some pretty good assumptions very quickly. So, I think some of the questions in your self-service model and other pieces would be about maybe presenting that information to the customer. Which of the 3 devices that you own is part of this? Or is this out of scope and we're going to require this? And that's some of the things that we do in some of our self-service specific screens, is if somebody's selecting a particular service request, it's asking them or prompting them for that information. Now, is it always perfect? Absolutely not. But it does at least move us forward and minimizes the number of times that I have to reach back out to the customer. And we do really kind of work with our customers to say, hey, I wouldn't have had to call in this case if we could get that information up front. So anytime you create a request in the future, make sure to include that. It will make your experience better in helping to train your users towards that particular piece. I think is a very important concept.
Just want to quickly comment on one other question here around, do you have strategies to reduce the number of support requests via email? So we talked a little bit about that before. In my opinion, it's extremely difficult to really gradually reduce it. I think as long as you offer that option officially, people will send emails, and it's very hard to change that. So I'm more on board with the strategy that you employed, Josh, in terms of switching it off. Yeah, you may still have to monitor a little bit in the back end, but really switching it off and clearly communicating this is not a channel that we support. Again, there should be multiple channels. I think on the email side, you probably have to have a more firm stance, so to speak, that you don't want want to offer this anymore. Of course, you want to proactively communicate that and talk about the alternatives, right? But in the end, again, I don't think it's an easy way to kind of reduce it gradually. You have to switch it off, right?
Yeah, and I think a big part of it is really focusing on the reasons why you want to turn it off. Because if you're managing email just in a regular mailbox and 20 people are managing the messages that are coming out, that is not a good environment for customer experience. You can't track it. You don't know what happened. You don't know who responded. If you're using a tool like we do in our case, where they come into our queuing system and it balances the request between chat and email and phone, that isn't a real good justification to move away. So I think you have to first think away, why do you want to reduce that? And then start to input, okay, here are alternative methods to get in, and we've made this easier. So when we turned off email, we turned on self-service. And so it was a perfect opportunity to pivot to our customers to a new channel. It wasn't like I was just turning it off. And I think if you're in an environment where you already have that, maybe use it as an opportunity to refresh your self-service experience, and then turn around and say, because of this new really awesome experience that we put in place where we've gotten customer feedback, we've decided to turn this channel off. And we're going to begin slowly doing that and communicating the reasons for it. Maybe it's cost, maybe it's management of that, maybe it's overall experience. I mean, some of ours was even security. I can spoof messages that come in. I can make things happen that I'm not validating the identity of the user on. And so I think you spin that story and begin to start to transition away. And eventually, as Peter mentioned, I don't think that you will ever get away, you will ever reduce it as long as it is the path to least resistance. So your users are always, it's so much easier just to pull up the help desk email and send an email than it is to go log into a self-service portal or to pick up the phone and call. So eventually you may have to shut it off if you want to reduce the usage of that channel, but really do that by bolstering your other services and advocating to your users, this is the reason we're turning this off, because we've launched something new that replaces this contact method.
And one thing you always got to keep in mind, though, is we taught our users for decades that this was the right answer. So we've got to always keep that in the back of the mind as we're making these shifts and changes, that we are, the user might think that we're changing our mind on this. Well, no, Josh pointed out, no, we have a better method to do this. This is communicate to your users why you're changing, not just, well, you used to say this and now you say that. Can't you guys make up your mind? Our users might feel that way. So over communicate why the change is happening and how the new method is better for them, or they might just get frustrated that you're taking it away.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, we probably have to leave it at this right now. We're already a little bit over, and I want to be conscious of the time.
Hey, Peter, I want to answer one question that I didn't quite get to finishing, and that was the question that Bill had about prioritizing your chat channels and your phone channel pieces. And I mentioned part of the answer to this question earlier, but Bill, I honestly will tell you, I do not prioritize one channel over the other. I treat them all the same, because I see all of our users utilizing the preference that fits their style, that fits what they want. And so phone calls and chats and emails and walk-up are all treated exactly the same. And we use a tool that helps us to balance that to individuals in the group. And so I think that's important to prioritize that way. You can use different call center solutions and others that will tweak how quickly certain things come in and maybe where you can prioritize them, but I leave them very much the same for phone calls versus chats and email messages that we have coming in, because I think it's extremely important to balance that for your users and treat them all with the same level of priority.
Thank you. Good point. So again, want to thank again all the attendees who joined in today. Thanks for joining, and I want to specifically thank you, Brian and Josh, to help with your comments and insights about it. And with that, I think it's a wrap for today. Thanks very much for joining.